Mahalo, Tirowami, and hello. Along with many of you, the Northern Marianas Humanities Council has been watching the demonstrations that are happening across the nation, across the world, even here in the Marianas, that are bringing renewed focus to a long-standing problem in our society, the problem of racial inequality. The Humanities Council is hosting this series of conversations to hopefully facilitate deeper understanding and discussion on this issue and how we can move forward as a community. In particular, we're focusing on the experience of African Americans in America who have been discriminated against disproportionately by individuals and institutions such as law enforcement, courts, media, financial institutions. So we're going to look at that today through the perspective of our guest. And as a reminder that our freedoms are fragile and that we must oppose those who would oppress and discriminate against others. I'm Catherine Perry, and our guest today is John Davis. John, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
As many of you probably know, John is a former teacher in the Sinai public school system. He taught U.S. government and other classes, a long-time Saipan resident, and he's here in this particular conversation in this series to help us understand racial equality and civil unrest. That's what we're talking about in the broad context of U.S. history and also his personal story. Wow, that is a lot. Thanks for volunteering to help us get a better understanding of this.
Well, thank you. I'd like to first make sure that everyone understands that I'm not an authority. I'm a minor academic. And of course, I've had 70 plus years of life experience. So I guess I'll start with the historical part of this conversation. Most people, when they talk about racial inequality or slavery or any of those types of subjects, they start back at 1619, which is, well, I think it was Jamestown in Virginia, where they first brought slaves to back in 1619, but that's not actually very accurate. Slaves were arguably brought to the Western Hemisphere from Europe and Africa, or Africa and Europe, in 1492. In 1492, that was the Columbus expedition to what is now called, or what was then called the New World. The Moors, who were the African, Northern African people, were evicted or chased out of Grenada in Spain. They had been there for 100 or so years in Spain and Portugal, in the Mediterranean portions of that part of Europe. They were chased out finally, but when the Europeans chased these people out, they became broke. They were broke from all the war, right? So that's the reason that Columbus was able to convince the Spanish that to finance his trips to
Find a shortcut to India.
Yeah, they didn't know that there was a big old landmass in between, right? They thought the ocean just went from their side to the other side.
Yeah.
And they ran into this huge landmass that they couldn't sail around. In Hispaniola, actually, which is now Dominican Republic and Haiti. So, and then after 1492, in the early 1500s, 1520 something, there was the Spanish tried to settle in what is now South Carolina. Slave revolt, right? They brought slaves from Africa to help them settle. Slaves got tired, revolted, and with the idea to flee to Spain, or I'm sorry, not Spain, but to flee to Florida. This rebellion caused that colony to fail, right? I tell you that in that manner because I want people to understand that the so-called riots and the protests, the violent protests, if you will, this is part of the fabric of the United States, right? Ever since black people have been in the United States, or let me rephrase, ever since Europeans came to the New World, there has been oppression of somebody, right? Earlier you and I were talking about the Native Americans, right? And as I said to you, right, I'm not going to speak on that because it's just not, I don't feel comfortable doing that. That's another conversation. But the Native Americans, the Chinese when they brought them to do the railroad, the Africans when they brought them here to be chattel, to be slavery, not here, but the United States to be the workers in the fields. There's always been that oppression, right? So, if you'll pardon me, I've got some notes here.
Sure. And I was, go ahead. I was also just, when I was preparing for our chat today, looking back on racial equality in the United States, and as you said, with the Native Americans, I mean, that's how the country started, was with the oppression of people who were different. So it's really quite sad when you think about it, that this is the foundation, the pre-foundation of our country.
Yes, exactly. And touching on that, if your foundation is kind of shaky,
Yeah.
right, it's gonna be doubly hard to build a building,
Yeah.
right? And our building has been lucky because it keeps wobbling, right? But it doesn't fall down,
Yeah.
right? And I want to make this clear: I'm an American, right? I'm proud to be an American, right? I'm never giving up my blue passport, right? But part of being American is being able to speak out and to try to change people's minds, to educate those who don't know,
Yeah.
right? One of the things I'm personally tired of is this idea that when someone says something stupid to you, and then someone says, well, they're just ignorant. No, I don't want to hear that anymore, right? This is 2020. Everybody carries around a library
Yeah.
in their pocket,
Yeah.
right? We're being
So
videoed.
are you saying then when people say things that are not right, saying they're just ignorant is no longer an excuse?
No longer
By
an excuse.
this day and age, I mean, we're so advanced technology, like you said, but we're still getting some of the fundamentals wrong, which is the way we treat each other.
Oh, exactly. But there is no excuse for that because I don't know about something we were talking about. You were speaking to a moment ago. I don't know anything about the Native American culture, but I can find out, right? So until I do find out, I believe we should keep our mouth closed, our ears open, as my teachers told me when I was in elementary school, and learn something, right? So anyway, I was looking at my notes here, and I can't talk about all of these things, but
Why not?
well, because there's just too many of them, right?
Okay. Hit
but
us with the highlights.
The highlights are that it was 1526 that the Spanish brought the Africans to South Carolina, what's now South Carolina. Then in 1619, and this 1619 is the name of a project that's called the 1619 Project at the Smithsonian, right? And it started last year. Well, the project started before that, but you can go online. I have an online subscription to the Smithsonian, so they send me stuff, right? So but anyone can get it. It's free, right? And go online, you can read about from 1619 to now, 401 years of essentially oppression. In my research for meeting with you today, I found out in 1664, Maryland passed the first law banning interracial marriage.
1664.
Yeah, 1664. Think about that for a moment. Until 1664, people of all the races could just marry, right? And 1664, Maryland said no, because they didn't want. It was intended to prevent English women from marrying African men, right? And I'm like, that would be odd to me, right? In a patriarchal society, the slave guy, right, didn't have any voice in his family, right? So, but I didn't live there in that time, so I don't know what preceded, but that's what the research said. Then in 1739, there was the Stonewall Rebellion, a slave revolt. In 1789, the Constitution was adopted, and slavery is never, even though it was the whole, practically the South had slaves, didn't mention it in the Constitution.
What do you think that was?
Well, it was historically, it was to mollify the South, right? They had the 3/5 clause in the Constitution where black people, were others. They didn't mention black people or slaves, or they mentioned Indians, right? But they said all others are 3/5 of men. Who else is there but the slaves, right? By the same token, in years before, the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Paine, James Madison wanted to put an argument against slavery into the Declaration of Independence. Southern states again jumped up and had a fit and said no. So in order to keep the Union together, it's always been since the beginning, wanted to have all the 13 colonies and then the succeeding states, right? Always wanted to keep that as one cohesive unit, and in order to have that done repeatedly over the history of the United States until about even today, until today, there's been this compromise with the southern states so they don't cause trouble, right? Did it with as I said, with the Declaration of Independence, did it with the Constitution of the United States. But 3/5 of a person was just for representation, because slaves still couldn't vote. So then from there we had, got ahead of myself. There was, just to mention a few, 1800, Gabriel's conspiracy. They wanted there was a conspiracy to overthrow the central government of Virginia. Didn't happen because they had a big storm, right, on August 30th of 1800, and which, by the way, is my birthday, right?
August 30th?
August 30th, right? They had a big storm. The roads were turned into quagmires, mud everywhere. Slaves couldn't move, right, from one place. We couldn't move quickly from one place to the other. The conspiracy was put down. Then there was the 1811 slave revolt in Louisiana.
So just a question, since we're also talking about civil unrest and how is it successful, would you say a lot of those revolts that you're looking at were successful on behalf of the slaves in getting what it was that they desired?
In that period of time, right, none of these could be considered successful. And there have been slave revolts all the way up until the Civil War, right? They were not successful because they it was hard to communicate. Small numbers of small groups of slaves. Slaves were not, I don't know, segregated into the people who lived with the master in the house, people who lived in the fields. People in the house are spies and what do you call them? I won't say traitors, but collaborators, if you will, because they're living in the house, they're wearing good clothes, they're not working out, they have a better life. They don't want to give that up, right? And they're suppressing the people who are out there working in the fields. The people who work in the fields cannot just walk around or go from farm to farm. So they are, it's hard to communicate. You can't have a revolt without communication,
Yeah,
right?
makes sense.
So no matter, even if you're the majority, which in some cases that was the case.
Overwhelming majority.
Overwhelming majority, but you don't have guns, right? You don't have communication, right? And some of those majorities are women and children, right? So you don't want to have them out there in the front. Like, there's a reason we protect women and children, because they keep the race going, right? You don't need all the men, right? So, what they did though is set a tone, set a standard, a value, that we are not just going to go away. We're not going to be oppressed forever. Even back then, I think those people thought, it's not today, but one day, right? Because why else would you keep doing it? And from 1500s to the late 1800s, mid 1800s, black people rose up and got smacked down. Rose up and got smacked down. I found though that many of the revolts, or not revolts, but the riots that took place over time, and we call them black race riots. When people say race riot, they immediately think black people are up to something. But many times race riots are white people. I found out, right? That some of the riots that I hadn't heard about when I was growing up weren't black people at all. They were white people.
For example?
There was you've heard of these. You've heard of the Rosewood Massacre, Tulsa Massacre. These are white folks, right? You've heard of, I forgot the name of it, Stono. I don't want to say it the right line. I'm sorry.
So
The Colfax, Louisiana Massacre. There's a bunch of.
Why did they call them race riots then?
Because two things in each one of the cases where white people get upset and decide they want to riot. Not just go out and lynch somebody, which is a separate thing, but a riot where you go into a neighborhood and you burn the houses and you shoot the men and you disenfranchise the women and children and send them out into the street and they don't have anywhere to go. It has to do with economics, jobs, right? It's just like what people say is happening with the Hispanic community in the States right now. They're taking their jobs, right? Well, white people move from the South or to the North, right? Because that's where better jobs are. White people had those jobs. Black people are willing to work for less because they didn't have anything, right? So they're willing to work for less. This displaces people. Now you've made it so I can't work. I'm really mad at you.
Yeah.
Right. So then, if you sit around and fester long enough, sooner or later, there's going to be some sort of action, usually mob action, and then riots, and people get hurt and killed. There was a lot of that, as a matter of fact, right? The two that I mentioned are the most famous are Rosewood and Tulsa, right? And they happened in the early 1920s. The Tulsa riots in Oklahoma, they talked about they were called the Black Wall Street Massacre, the Greenwood Massacre. It's got a lot of names, but it's Tulsa. Juneteenth is the celebration of when the announcement, if you will, of the Emancipation Proclamation was finally delivered to Texas, right? On June 19th, 1867, I want to say, I might be wrong, but it was, the war was over,
Yeah.
right?
It was like 2 years after the Emancipation
Yes,
Proclamation.
yes.
It finally got to you said the governor?
It got to Austin, Texas.
Texas, yeah.
But Texas back then was huge, right? So I know it didn't get to all of Texas. But it got to the governor, right? It was official. It got to the state house in Texas. Historically, since we were talking about why we're talking about this now, well, you often hear people talk about peaceful protests. That's nonsense. In the history of the United States, in the history of the world, right? No one, and I defy anyone to tell me when people just walked out and said, I'm going to sit here and talk to you, or I'm not moving until you listen to me. Whenever there was no violence, ever, there's always violence. If you want change, there's going to be not the promise of violence, but actual violence.
Can we talk a little bit also about the civil rights movement and what that changed in our nation and what it didn't change?
In my opinion, the civil rights movement started in 1492. That's just me, right? And from that time, all the way, those riots, those massacres, those protests, those conspiracies, some of which I talked about earlier, those things happened because people were trying to change their situation for the better. None of those things, as I told you earlier, none of those things ever turned out good for those people. Today we are still having to protest, right? But going back to what you call the civil rights era, and what most people call the civil rights era, was back in the 60s. I never marched with anybody. I didn't sit in with anybody. I was recruited to be a member of the Congress on Racial Equality, CORE, C-O-R-E, which is not in existence today, but it was Congress of Racial Equality back in the day.
Where at?
In Cincinnati.
Okay.
Right. I've been in the riots, right? And I was in the Army, right? But usually something would happen. We talked about civil rights. People got beat down, killed, hung, back in the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, right? Because the United States, we didn't have rights. This person right here, right? I remember clearly not having all the rights that everybody else had in the United States.
What do you remember? What you shared?
I remember the first time a white girl kissed me. We were doing the pilot project for, I forget what it's called now. Head Start, for Head Start. And that was in 1964, 65, something like that, right? I was 16. And they had hired kids from all over the city, low income people, to work on this project. Not to be a part of the project or to be one of the kids, but we were there as monitors and helpers and whatever, right? It was $1.25 an hour, big money back in those days, right? Anyway, for us it was summer, the summer job, because we had to go back to school. So the summer, our project came to a close for there. They were trying to make a point that Head Start was a viable thing. Project came to an end. We had to go back to school. You know, everybody says goodbye, hugs and all that stuff. And this is the first time that outside of school, that I had been in an integrated community. And this girl, I don't even remember her name. She came over, threw her arms around my neck to say goodbye. She said goodbye, right? Kissed me on this cheek. I was so terrified, right? I pushed her away, ran to get into my uncle's car, and cracked my head on the frame of the car because I was in such a big hurry to get away.
Why?
Because one of my experiences years earlier, I was 12. The police came into my home. I was sitting in my bedroom on 12th Street, downtown Cincinnati, looking out the window. And the police broke down my door, right?
The door of your house?
In the bedroom.
Oh, the bedroom.
Right? And snatched me up, drugged me out, threw me in a police car, and took me to jail. And my horrible crime was that I had looked at a white woman. I swear to this day, I don't know what white woman they're talking about, right? I don't remember seeing any white woman, right? But apparently, my eyes swept the neighborhood, came across a white lady, and she saw me looking in her direction, right? And didn't mean
you
it.
were 12 years
I was
old.
12 years old, right? At the age of 8, 9, 10, 8, my sister and I would have to run home from school because we lived in this one neighborhood. Well, it was the same neighborhood actually as 12th Street, where we were the only 2 black kids in the school.
Wow.
And despite what the law is, people are going to be people. And those kids called us niggers. They picked on us. All kinds of craziness went on, right? And the most crazy thing is every day, well, not literally every day, but almost every day, we had to run home from school. Run home from school. For about, schools maybe Peasley Elementary School in Cincinnati was maybe 4 or 5 blocks away, right? I got really fast back in those days, right? I was in South Carolina because my family is from South Carolina. I grew up in Ohio, but I was born in South Carolina. And used to go visit grandma and stuff, right? And I remember one summer down there, and I remember because I could read, I grew up where I could read the signs, and it says colored only, white only. There were different signs for water fountains, restroom. We had to go to the back of the theater and go up into the outside steps to the balcony, and that's where the black people got to sit. We could sit on the first floor.
Can I ask you,
Yeah.
did you not think twice about that because everybody was doing it, or how did you feel about that?
In Cincinnati, our for the most part, our communities were separate, right? I knew, like when I was in elementary school in South Avondale, the only white people I saw were my teachers and the principal, right? All the kids were black, right? I moved downtown, but my family moved downtown to where Peasley was, and all the kids were white, right? The neighborhood I lived in was mixed black and white. Everybody, you know, there, right? But we didn't hang out together, right? The black people lived on one street. We lived on one part of 12th Street, and the next block over, white people lived, right? There was Broadway was the name of the street between us, right? Across Broadway, you're in the white neighborhood, right? The only thing we had in common was, well, we were all poor, right? Then when I moved back to South Avondale, that's where we always migrate back to. It's a black community, right? Didn't know any white people who lived there. I didn't know any white folks, right? I knew one Jewish family that lived across the street in that whole neighborhood, right? Was one Jewish family, right? Lived there until after I went in the military, right? So I've grown up with this my whole life, right? My awakening happened after I got into basic training, and I really wanted to talk about Sergeant Panasoski.
Go ahead.
Sergeant Panasoski was, I think he was a Polish guy, but he was my sergeant in basic training.
Okay.
And he treated everybody with the same contempt.
Disregard.
Yeah, he was just.
How did I know you were going to say that?
He just was. But I saw drill sergeants and who were obviously what we now call racist. But Panasoski didn't care.
You liked the fact that he treated all of you so badly.
I liked Sergeant Panasoski. I liked Sergeant Panasoski back then. When he came in and taught me how to be a soldier. And when he taught me, I was not the biggest guy in the platoon in my basic training team. But I did what I was supposed to do, how I was supposed to do it. I tried to excel at what I was doing. And he recognized that, made me a squad leader, and then promoted me to platoon leader, right? That wouldn't have happened in the other platoon. And when I got into the regular army, found out that, oh Lord, it was like that everywhere, right? Just like it was out in the civilian community. I really appreciated that man because I had to fight all these white dudes, right? Literally, violently fight, right? Because they were, I went to basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Okay.
And they had drawn people from all over the southern United States, blacks, whites, everybody anywhere, in whatever, I don't know, maybe it's because some experiment, because these people did not act like they'd ever seen black people before, right? And we tried to keep separate, but you just can't do that, right, in the military. So that meant, especially when I became a squad leader, and then later the platoon leader, and they weren't taking orders from me. And Panasoski was not getting in the middle of it. He told me, take care of it. I walk around with a bloody nose, a big face, and black eyes for a couple of weeks. But I had a fight every day. But when we got out the week before we got our basic training, and I went to Cincinnati, Ohio. This was in November 1965. And those same white guys, because I was only one from Cincinnati.
Oh, okay.
But there were a lot of guys from Louisville and Cincinnati, white guys. Those same white guys asked me if I wanted to ride with them. And we went with guys who would never have done that when we arrived 11 weeks or 10 weeks early. But arrived and said, "You must be kidding."
So you literally broke down barriers with your fists.
It was a two-way street, I'll put it like that, right? Yeah, but and what's important here is that it was November 1965. We had this, back in those days, there was no super highways, right? It was state roads, right? Small roads,
yeah.
right? And we stopped in, I don't even know the name of the town. But the point is, in uniform, I was told that I had to leave a store. And those guys that I had earlier had to deal with, or dealt with each other, those guys stood up for me and says, no, you know, see this guy, he's wearing the same uniform as us, so on and so forth,
wow,
right? What the hell is wrong with you? So he threw everybody out the store. So, yeah, but it could have been worse because they were like, some of the guys were like, we're not leaving. You don't get to treat us this way, and you're not going to treat him this way. But, so I've had that experience. I've been in South Carolina. I've had to step off the sidewalk, which is totally alien to me. But in Cincinnati, we had some idea that, okay, we are this illusion that we're free people. Nah, step off the sidewalk with white people walking on the sidewalk. They take up the whole sidewalk.
This was in the 60s.
This was like in the 50s, the late 50s.
Can I ask you, after the civil rights movement, what did you see change and what did you see not change in your life as a result of that?
Someone challenged me the other day and says, well, things have changed. And it says, because I said things haven't changed.
Yeah.
They haven't. Things have just gone underground, right? I am 70.
We're going to come back to that.
I'm 70 years old. People, I'm alive. I'm not dead, right? Mm-hmm. In my lifetime, people have treated me badly, called me names, kept me from opportunities. I've seen all of these things, right? Where did those people go to? They're still here. You see? The ones who are like what I call rabid racists, right? They just said, okay, it's against the law. More people are against me than are with me now. So I'm just gonna be quiet. Then we got the current president, and he said, now they're like, we can be ourselves again, right? I used to ask people, what happened to him? What happened to that guy who used to call me those names? He's still alive. I'm still alive. He's still alive, or she's still alive, whatever. So I don't think to answer your question, I know it took a long way around it, but I didn't see anything change. I just saw things, they became more subtle, you say. And they was the time before the civil rights movement. A lot of people call that the struggle back then. Black people don't call it necessarily saying the civil rights movement. It was during the struggle. Mm-hmm. Then we had this period of quiet where things went underground, still murdering people, still not letting them. There's a thing called redlining, right?
I do want to talk about that. Let you talk about
They
it.
still did that, right? Can't get a loan. You can't buy a house. Healthcare right out the window, non-existent. So the opportunities and the inequality is still there. And some things were transferred, right? In the late 50s through the 60s, right? The civil rights era. So what changed was that in the 50s, the 60s, black men and the family unit was a thing. It was you know. Skip to the end of the so-called end of the 70s, early 70s. Iran-Contra thing was going on. They put all those young black men in jail, whether they needed to be or not. Now we have fractured black families, right? Because all these young black men who would have been fathers and real fathers at home are now in jail. So then we had two generations grow up without strong male models in the home. That's changing now because more and more people are becoming aware, right? But before the civil rights era, before 1965, that thing I told about the store, right? That was regular, right? In my home, in Cincinnati, they found a guy hanging from a light pole, right? He'd been lynched, he'd been hung, right? When I was a young boy, I was like, I think I was 9 when that happened, right? Mom wouldn't let us go out of the house at all, right?
I mean, let's just take a moment
Uh-huh.
and let that statement sit.
Yeah. Same thing's happening now. Not lynching, like hanging from stuff, right? But moms and dads are still protecting their children, right? From the same beast, or when I say beast, I don't mean white people as a group, but that beast out there that's killing young black men, right? And a lot of young black women, right? And now the beast is killing everybody because white people, as we saw here in the Marianas, and in Guam, and in Europe, people are standing up for everybody, right? Regardless of, these are all young, well, mostly young people, right? Standing up and saying, okay, we don't want that world anymore, okay? So that beast, whether they're, and there's a bunch of black people in that beast also, by the way, right? Because they don't want they've been good, the establishment has been good for them, right? But the majority of us, not so much. So they're out there, they're shoving down old white men, 74-year-old white men, running over them. Did you see that video?
I didn't see the video.
I saw it and I
to
was
watch all the videos.
stunned. A cop went back to help this old man, and another cop grabbed him and wouldn't let him go. I was like, but anyway, that kind of stuff. But go back to change. I'm sorry, I told you I rambled. Back then it was more open. The discrimination, the prejudice, the problem. In the 1960s, late 1960s, early 1970s, it was just they say they passed law. So what? We don't care, right? We the people who were wanting to discriminate against people, they didn't care. They said, well, they didn't believe that the law applied to them. So what's happening today? We have more young people who are saying, okay, I care about my brother, whatever color he is or whatever. See, people like my age have all got to die, not just the bad ones. People like me, because I'm going to keep reminding people. And I'm thinking sometimes people don't need to be reminded, especially when they're in their 30s, right? In 30s, 20s, 40s. They need to get out there and just do. Exactly. So when I say I don't see anything that's changed, right? Because I see the subtleties, right? Where people say, well, I've worked for everything that I've in my life. I've worked for everything I have. Yeah, we all have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm a veteran, I'm a retired vet, and I have to tell my guys, white ones, dude, you work, me too, right? And we all have had help. No, I do it all alone. Like, none of us does anything alone. We all work. If we live in a society, we get help from that society, right? I used to tell my students when they complain about how they're being discriminated against, right, or how they're being picked on. I'm like, you guys just don't get it, right?
What do you mean by that?
Totally, well, not totally, but unrelated. Homelessness, right? Just to give people here say, well, we don't have, well, not homeless, maybe not, but I'm gonna use it anyway. Homeless person in Saipan, a local, tomorrow. I don't have a home. I don't have any food. You're in the tropics, dude. there's a lagoon out there full of fish.
We're all related to somebody.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't, I'm sorry, I didn't want to say that, but yeah.
But it's true.
Yeah, I'm like, how can, and privately I used to ask, how can anybody say they're homeless on site now? I do not understand it. But anyway, it's not like being homeless in Cincinnati in the wintertime. It's cold, freezing, no food, no heat, right? So that's a problem when you say, I don't have something in the Marianas, right? But I do have a support system. Well, the people who live here have a support system. People who in the United States may or may not have that support system, and it's cold, right? So what I'm saying is you need to be thankful for the crap you got.
Yeah.
I say crap. I'm sorry. But for the things you should be thankful for the things they have instead of whining about the things you don't have, right? I remember, like I said, as far as racism is concerned, I remember all those days, right, when I didn't have freedom to speak, couldn't go where I wanted to go. Didn't much mind about that because I was a child. When I left home as a man, I got a rude awakening, right? It wasn't just that store in Kentucky, right? Of course, when I left basic training, I went to Vietnam, I went to Europe, not so much, right? But when I came back in '68, here we were again, right? Well, not 68, I'm sorry, in 1969 I came back to the United States. And there we were again. I sat in 74, sat at a traffic stop in a car full of white guys. A white lady was in the car with me. I was just giving her, she was in the Army, giving her a ride back to our unit. She was in my, we're the same unit. Back to my unit. And these guys thought I was kidnapping her or something.
Oh.
They chased me all the way back, fortunately I was in the car. They chased me all the way back to Fort McClellan. True story. I'm like, that's 30 years ago, 40 years ago now? I'm still alive, people. Right? So those things are behind me. But I like to tell young people, things can change that fast because the Constitution and all those rights everybody likes to yap about are ink on paper, right? And they only count as long as we believe in that ink on that paper, right? If we don't believe in that, if you don't believe in it, I don't believe in it, it's meaningless, right? So, change, I don't think there's been a lot of change. Who's doing the bad stuff, is openly doing the bad stuff, that part has changed. Used to be back there just people running around in suits and ties and their spiffy little hats, you go out and hang somebody or burn them or whatever. Now, those same people are in the police force. Say, I remember when the cops were the good guys, right? Not so much anymore, right? Because those people who were bad back then, that type of person has just moved over to here.
Related to that, and you had also mentioned a little bit before about redlining, could you just touch a bit upon institutionalized racism, as you mentioned, through redlining and financial institutions, through law enforcement?
Well,
how does that work?
in my mind,
And let me make sure we're still working.
okay,
Go
in
ahead.
my mind, racism, as we commonly speak of it, is only institutionalized. Right? I don't think that individuals.
Because the family is also an institution, and that's one way racism is.
But I don't think that's. I think that's valid, but I don't think that's the big mover and shaker in this big racism argument.
Okay.
Right? I think the thing that holds us back as a country, as a community, right, is institutionalized, meaning government, meaning businesses, people who benefit from making me and you hate each other, right? You don't get any benefit from hating me. I don't get any benefit from hating you. Man, the human, the group, the species, right, is about what can benefit me. That's in our nature. That's what we are. What benefit do I get out of hating you?
Well, a lot of times hate is based in fear, right? So it's something about you that makes me fearful.
That's
Fear
it.
of loss, or you know what I'm saying? Not
Yes,
that it makes sense, but that's probably it.
But again, go back to the riots and the massacres, right? It's fear that I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah.
Fear
Yeah.
that I'm not going to be able to support my family.
Yes.
But how does that fear come to be? There is no benefit from me hating you because you got this job. What's the benefit is, how can we both earn money to raise our families?
Yeah.
That's the benefit. And given the choice, we would work that out. Might take a generation, or it might take years for us to do that, but we would work that out. You can't explain 400 plus years of problems with the idea of fear. It just doesn't work. It doesn't hold water. 400 years, I'm afraid. We live next door to each other.
Yeah.
You learn something about me. You see? So that's why I don't believe in that. But the institutions that, like our governments, when I say governments, I mean the U.S. government, our local governments, they benefit, right? The big businesses in the United States, they benefit. Redlining, right? Soldiers went off to war. Came back after the First World War, right? And they're like, oh, I should have the same rights and whatever, right? I'm gonna buy a house. He said, no, we can't, we're not gonna sell to those people. I'm not gonna sell to them black people because then if I do something with them, then I'm gonna do something with these people because they'll see that, and I'll give you an example of how that works here in a minute. But they say, oh, they got it. I can get another thing, right? So we don't want to have that. We want to keep everybody in their little niche. So who can we control the easiest? The minority, because there's fewer of them. So redlining is where somebody, usually in the government and the business community, drew literal red lines on a map and said, this is a black community. And we're going to hold property values down in those communities, right? And we're going to tax not arbitrarily, artificially. We're going to increase the property, the taxes, right? Doesn't have to make sense, okay? But then when you go in that area, right, you say, okay, that's where the black people are going to go, or primarily going to go. They're going to want to buy houses because they want the American dream. The American dream is own that house, right? So we're going to buy houses there, right? So when we redline that area, they're going to put where the rest of the place has got 5% AP or 5% interest rate, right? And there's going to be 8 or 10.
And this is how people who live in those redlined areas are prevented from owning their home, is because of the higher interest rate. And then that also feeds into education, because a lot of times, if not always, in the States, your school, the funding your school gets often comes from property tax. So if you're paying, or in a poorer community paying less tax, then your schools in that community also get less tax. And if you're on the other side of the red line, right across the street, and your area is paying more tax, then your school may have a lot more money.
Exactly. And the same effect happens when, and guess who does this? The government. They gerrymandered. Gerrymandering was at one time illegal.
Wait, at one time?
Yeah, way back when, right? But now they gerrymander all over the place, right? And I think it was right after.
Now,
during the
gerrymander is basically determining voting districts.
Yes, they artificially create voting districts to either suppress the vote or in that area, or to increase the value
And
of
they
the
can
vote
change the outline of that area every
every 10 years.
10 years.
All right. Well, that's not what I just said is not true. The people who, it's more often than every 10 years, but I don't know exactly how long. But the information they use is every 10 years because they take it from the census, right? But you can devalue a vote in an area, or you can increase the value of the vote in an area with gerrymandering, right? So they use, but only the group in power can draw the state line, or draw the district lines, right? So you have to do some extraordinarily good campaigning or whatever, so that you can get those people out and get our people in. But once our people in, we can gerrymander too. Now, Democrats in today's world pretend like they don't gerrymander. Everybody does.
My eye was watering earlier, and it's
Yeah.
actually because I had something in my eye. I wasn't crying over what we were talking about, but I actually did cry about this topic when I was talking to another acquaintance of ours about being on the show, and we're chatting, and they didn't want to, and I feel very fortunate to have grown up in the Marianas, where generally we all get along and
Right.
we live peaceably together. But this issue of racial inequality, when I went to the States for college in Missouri, it really broke my heart. And talking with my friend and hearing them express that they still feel oppressed. But they didn't use the word oppressed, but it obviously still greatly affects the way that they feel.
Is this a black person?
Yes.
Okay.
It again broke my heart.
Right.
So, and some people may say, like, why do we need to talk about this in the Marianas? Is there an issue? I mean, like I said, we get along. I actually didn't want to do this series, John, really personally.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say I didn't want to do it, but racial inequality is such, and I'm not even black,
Yeah.
a painful topic for me. And I was like, we get along in the Marianas. We don't really need to stir up anything. And in chatting with John and other people, other representatives of our black community here in the Marianas, I can see that I had something to learn, and that there still is a need to have deeper understanding and discussion. And I want to ask you your thoughts on that.
I think you mean here in the Americas?
Yeah.
Well, I came here in 1986.
And now I'm really crying.
Yeah, I know. Right. I started to interrupt you, but I'm like, well, this is good stuff. Right? No, when people have, when you get in your emotions, get into whatever the topic is, that's good stuff, right? You ought to see me sometimes. Right? Now I don't cry so much, and I do cry, people. Right?
What do you cry about?
We'll talk about that another time. Right?
Okay.
But when I came here in 1986, the people here were not U.S. citizens yet. Right? I got here in September. Officially became the citizens of the Marianas, or the residents of the Marianas. Became citizens of the United States in November 1986. Yeah, that's right. And when I arrived here, and for years after, and I didn't get it for a while, but when I wasn't an American, right? And it took me a little, I became a taxi driver out here in
Wait,
1999.
you weren't an
I
American?
was not an American.
Oh.
I mean, to the locals.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was, to tell you the truth, right? But when the local people talked about an American,
Yeah.
they were talking about white people.
Yeah.
And it took me
I
a
remember
little,
that. Yeah.
it took me a little bit to, I'm like, who are these people? I am an American. But I didn't question people. I just
Yeah.
sort of, and then I found out they were talking about white people. So, okay, but I left here, I stayed here a year, more than a year. I was here for a 2-year contract. I came to open the CHC, assistant opening the CHC. And there were some people here who, I came back, I should say, in 1989. I left in 88, came back in 89. It got cold in the States. Truth. That's why I came back.
Cincinnati too.
Yeah. Well, this was in Texas.
Oh,
right?
okay.
In the high country,
Okay.
it gets way colder than it does in Cincinnati.
Okay.
Right? So it was, I couldn't take it. I'm like, this is madness. Because it doesn't snow, it's just cold. Right? And I came back here anyway, and I met some young man here, or a young man. He was doing his doctoral, he was a black guy doing a doctoral degree. I don't know what it was on some cultural thing out here. Anyway, he would tell me that he was being picked on, he was being discriminated against, people were messing with him. He said that he would go to his office and somehow these people would break into his office daily and vandalize his office. He told me he spent as much time painting over racial epithets as he did doing his work, actual work.
And this was in the
The late 80s, right? So when I came back out here in 89, I got
People would tell
called. It had been that way before I left, but I didn't. It just didn't sink in, right? And I would tell people, this is a problem. This is problematic. This is an insult. This is offensive in my culture, right? And people here were like, so after a while, that discussion went right back to fighting, right? Yes, I've been in a lot of fights in the Marianas about that word, not about race or ethnicism or any of that stuff, just about that word, right? Skip ahead 30 years, right? And you hear kids in the school singing it like it's like their brothers or something.
Yeah.
Like, oh God.
That is the context in today's society.
Right. So I'm not I don't
In
get,
many cases, not
yeah,
all
no,
cases.
you're right. I don't get so upset now. But when I first came out here, many people, especially people from the mainland United States, would talk about racism here. It's not racism. It's the people who we will call locals are ethnocentric, right? They're not racist, right? They're just not, right? Because Chamorro isn't a race. Carolinian is not a race, right? Pacific Islander is not a race. It's an ethnicity, right? In the common use of the language, right?
But I believe in the U.S. Census, it's considered a race.
If you look at those, okay, if you look at most of these documents we're talking about, you'll find that I'm not sure they say race on those things.
That was like pick one.
Yeah, they'll say that, right? But I don't think they say race.
So, anyways, getting back to the point, which is
Well, my deal is that when somebody talks about racism, most of us have a pretty definite picture of what that is in our minds, right? People here talk about racism, but they're not talking about racism when they say this person is a racist. You'll read it. I read the newspaper, and somebody in the comment section online, they'll be talking about racism. I'm like, these aren't racist. That's not a race. They're not. They don't.
Maybe they mean they're discriminating.
Yes, exactly.
But it's not on the basis of race.
Yeah,
they're confusing the words.
They're confusing the words.
Yeah.
But it's not just locals, right? Everybody throws around that word like it's a spear, right? That we're gonna mow them down with the machine gun just by calling them racist. I'm like, come on. Here's the deal, guys. Everybody who's gonna watch this. There are some things that offend me today, right? None of them are calling me a racist, right? People who say, I don't see color. That's offensive.
Why is that offensive?
Because it's diminishing the actual problem. I don't see color. You're lying, first of all, right? Because this color is part of who I am. I grew up with this. This is part of me. Just like that color is part of you, right? That, for good or ill, right? Much of what, because it's not our fault, right? And it doesn't matter whose fault it is, but much of the experience we've had in the United States of America, and in my case, I say this way because I don't know what your travel experience has been, but around the world that I've been, how people perceive and treat me, think of me, is based on the color of my skin. So when you say, or someone should say, I don't see color, we should stop seeing color. I'm like, you need to shut up because you're gonna piss me off, right?
Because you're denying
Because
the fact that.
Exactly.
What if they meant, I don't treat people differently based on how they look?
Then you wouldn't have to tell me that.
Unless it came up as part of the conversation.
If you treated,
Like if you brought it up.
if I brought it up, right? If I brought it up, it would be because, well, okay, I can't see it, but it would be because of something you've done,
Yeah.
right? Your actions, in all cases, would speak more than your words. Because I used to tell people, yeah, I'm a racist,
Yeah.
right? I'm not a racial supremacist, right? Which is an important difference. I'm a racist because, well, I'm black. I identify with people who are black. I identify with people who have color in their skin or have more melanin in their skin, right?
Yeah.
But then I went to, on the side note, I went to Papua New Guinea the first time.
And they thought you were from there.
Yeah, oh yeah, but that's not that wasn't the thing for me. The thing was, I went to get off the airplane.
Yeah.
They opened the door, they did everything, and I went down the aisle. Back in those days, they didn't have jetways.
Yeah.
You got off the airplane and got on the tarmac, walked to the airport, to the terminal. And I got to the top of the stairs. I got to the door, got off at the top of the stairs, and looked around there and discovered just how white I am. Right? I'd never seen that many black people at that time. I'd never seen that many black people all in one place, and I didn't know any of them. And I was terrified. Right? That's racism in the classic understanding of the term. Right? So I decided, that was back in the 1990. And I decided that's a term that I'm not going to use. I'm not going to tell anybody I'm a racist anymore. Right? Because it's disturbing.
Well,
So-
I really, I want to say, John has been in the paper. You guys know him personally, probably. So Are you open to continuing this conversation with people if they're interested?
Yeah,
And I also want to ask you for any final thoughts before we go.
well, first thing is, yeah, I know that when I talk, as I warned you earlier, I tend to ramble and I take one subject and the next thing you know, I'm over here talking about something else.
Yeah.
That's just the way I'm free flowing in my thoughts. I will talk to anyone about anything that I know about, that I have not, I just don't discriminate that way. I will tell people when I don't know something. And so I'm open to discuss this with you or anyone. And I really appreciate you having me. I know that I forget what it was, but you asked me to do something once before that had something to do with racial issues.
Yeah.
Right? And in the Marianas, to tell you the truth, I am very hesitant to do that because I don't want to, I'm the minority here, right? And I feel that as long as everyone treats me with a certain amount of dignity, everyone can live their life the way they feel like it, right?
Yeah.
If this was a black community in the United States, I would have more skin in the game, so pun. And I'd be more active. But I've chosen to live here, right? I've chosen to live here because a great part of why I have chosen to live here is that we don't have a lot of racial turmoil, right? That I don't have to deal with that craziness, right? I miss being in the United States sometimes, but when I have that feeling, I think about why I'm here, and the feeling goes away, right? It's particularly now that I've gotten a little older, right? I don't want to be dealing with this stuff. I've survived till now. I want to live till I'm 90 or beyond, right? So I don't have the time for that. I've taught kids while I was in high school to be tolerant of others until you can learn. Tolerance is not good, just being tolerant. But until you can genuinely say, I understand, or I'm gaining an understanding, tolerance is as good as we're going to get, and as good as we can expect to get. So, as long as people tolerate me and my running off the mouth,
And they might even like you.
you're messing with my reputation.
Go ahead.
No, I'm not going to say that. But yeah, I enjoyed this. Again, I have a tendency to, hey, too long, especially when I'm sitting. Right? But if anybody wants to talk or you want to talk, I've already this is my first step out there, putting my foot in the game.
Yeah.
If you can can I make a criticism on there?
Sure.
Right, it's not a criticism, but if you want me to do, or if you ever call me, have to say, this one thing, I want you to tell me about this thing, right? Because that way I won't, this is to save you, not save me.
Yeah.
That way I won't ramble so much.
Well, I think you've done a really great job of kind of giving us a perspective on this
Right.
through the history of the U.S., which is
Right.
what we were aiming for.
Well,
Thank you so much.
The history of the U.S. is long, is almost 500 years, well, from the beginning to now, is over 400 years. Is complex. People need to understand that we live in a democracy. As I said earlier, we are not going to give up this passport. I'm not giving up that citizenship,
Yeah.
right? But with that, democracy is messy, right? It's an ongoing, this thing we're doing in the United States, bad as it is an ongoing experiment in the rights of man.
Well put.
So, thank you.
Thank you. We've been chatting today with John Davis as part of the series hosted by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council on Racial Equality and Civil Unrest. Again, the program is presented by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council with a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And the opinions from John and I do not necessarily represent those of the council. I have to say that. But we're so pleased that you took the time to listen in today, and we hope to see you on our next interview. And as always, John is here, I'm here if you'd like to discuss it further. Thanks, John.
Thank you.